What a crazy week it has been for the Las Vegas Raiders when it comes to rumors and speculation. And the first one we got to talk about is there has been a rumor floating around that Antonio Pierce's future as the Raiders head coach is quote unquote in serious doubt. Per NFL Network's Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport, they have stated that the belief in league circles continues to be that Antonio Pierce's future with the team is in serious doubt. And they did mention the fact that another win this week could potentially help him keep his job. And look, me personally, whoever's making those decisions, to me, that's a dumb decision. I feel like Antonio Pierce at this point, you should already know whether or not you want to move forward with him next season or if you don't. And it really shouldn't be based off of these last few weeks where the season is completely over. And I really think that's one area why the Raiders situation is such a mess right now. You got players, you got coaches like Antonio Pierce that are very likely fighting for their job. And if this is true, if there is a good chance Antonio Pierce is not going to come back next season, well, then I'm really sure that he probably gets that sense as well. You can kind of feel when your job is on the line. And ultimately, if Mark Davis or Tom Telesco, whoever, like I said, whoever is making these decisions, if they haven't had a one-on-one conversation with Antonio Pierce, reassuring him that they plan to play out his entire contract. AP signed a 2-year deal last season. And when he was asked about his job security in a press conference, he simply stated that he is under contract for next season, which is something that really doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence based on that answer alone. To me, him being under contract doesn't really mean a whole lot. I mean, Josh McDaniels was under contract when he got fired. Jack Del Rio as well. He had just came off of getting a 4-year extension with the Raiders, and 1 year into that extension, he got fired for John Gruden. So ultimately, those contracts don't guarantee 100% job security. And just based on the comments that Antonio Pierce has been given in certain press conferences, especially when it came to that Ask Tom Telesco remark, when he was asked about us losing out on the number 1 overall pick, it definitely seems like Antonio Pierce is very likely auditioning for other teams and ultimately trying to make the best out of a shitty situation with this regular season. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders go ahead and try to win another game tomorrow against the New Orleans Saints. And, against the Saints, that's a very winnable matchup as well. They will not have Derek Carr as a quarterback. Alvin Kamara is going to be out as well, so we're very likely going to be playing against Spencer Rattler at the quarterback position, who looked terrible in his last matchup where he put up a goose egg, 0 points. So like I said, it could be a very winnable situation for the Raiders again. And by us winning, we would more than likely drop down further in the NFL draft order. But we'll just have to see what happens tomorrow. But ultimately, though, this is really not the news you want to be out in the open, out in the air during this situation, during this time period in the season. But usually where there's smoke, there's fire. It just kind of feels like Antonio Pierce may be playing his last games here with the Raiders. And it's just been a weird situation all the way around from Antonio Pierce. I will say if he does get fired, I do think he did get a bit of a raw deal right here. I do think he did get a little bit screwed over. Now, look, I'm also going to be honest about him. There's a lot of things he could have done better as the head coach. But at the end of the day, when you hire an interim head coach, you got to know he is going to struggle early on. And although there's a lot of things that have made me worried about Antonio Pierce being the future as our head coach, I will say ultimately, though, he wasn't given a quarterback this season. He definitely got dealt with some unlucky injuries. I mean, how many players on the defensive side of the football have been hurt? And ultimately, I think it just boils down to the Raiders in this offseason. We did not do the right things necessary to try to be the best team possible this season. At the end of the day, when you roll into a season with Gardner Minshew and with Aiden O'Connell, look, with all due respect to him, that's usually a recipe for disaster. The only way I thought it could work out is if we could have a dominant running game and a dominant defense, and obviously neither of those things panned out. And that's ultimately what led this season to be a dumpster fire. So ideally, I would like to give Antonio Pierce one more season. It's going to have to be like a make or break season for him. They're going to have to address the quarterback position, and you're going to have to see serious progress or else he's going to be out. But the way it's looking, there's a good chance AP could be one and done with the Raiders. And like I said, I don't think Antonio Pierce was dealt the best hand right here. And ultimately, this whole situation has been kind of strange with the Raiders, with Antonio Pierce and with Tom Telesco. I mean, last season when AP stepped in as the interim head coach, we had interim general manager Champ Kelly. That synergy between him and Champ Kelly seemed pretty healthy. Seemed like they were both on the same page. I thought if Antonio Pierce was going to get the head coaching position, very likely they were going to give it to Champ Kelly as well. But we got kind of a surprise with Tom Telesco being hired the general manager. So right there and then, I mean, usually situations like that, those relationships are usually doomed from the start. You usually like to see your general manager get hired and then he personally hires the head coach, his guy. Obviously, this was not the situation here with the Raiders. So it's just been an awkward year for the Raiders. And also, too, I mean, Antonio Pierce just does not seem like the same guy he was last season. And I don't really know why that is. Just something has not seemed right with Antonio Pierce and just this whole situation, this whole dynamic between our head coach and the general manager. So just given all these situations, given all these factors, I think there is a good chance Antonio Pierce will no longer be the head coach next season. And if that's the case, I mean, it's going to be a super interesting offseason. We're going to have to hire a brand new head coach. And ultimately, we're going to have to hit on this position because another thing I wanted to talk about is this whole Max Crosby situation. Look, Max Crosby went on his podcast and said a couple different things. Just listen to what he had to say.
I mean, it's new years of inconsistency. You know what I mean? It's new coaches every other year and this and that and new teammates. And there's been plenty of times where I'm like, damn, like this D-line is cold. And then I come back and every single one of them's gone. You know what I mean? And it's like, what the you know what I mean? And then it just, there's on and on and on. There's a lot of things. So it's just like, it's tough, bro. You know what I mean? Like my contract situation, like I have no more guaranteed money. There's a lot of different things. Like obviously, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that need to be talked about. And I'm looking forward to those conversations. So I'm really looking forward to this offseason, the process. And yeah, there's so many different things that got to be talked about. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
So as we can see, he was talking about the Myles Garrett contract situation and how this also correlates to his current situation with the Raiders. Look, the one thing I'll say with Max Crosby is, look, he for sure is going to want that contract to be renegotiated. He wants that guaranteed money. And so this is going to be another interesting factor into the offseason because not only are we going to have to figure out what happens with the head coaching position if Antonio Pierce does get fired, but we're also going to have to figure out that whole Max Crosby situation as well. There's a lot of players on the defensive side of the football, too, that are due for a contract as well. I mean, the Raiders do have a lot of cap space, but these are just a lot of important decisions that are going to have to be made. And ultimately, with the whole Max Crosby situation, I mean, do I really think he could potentially demand a trade and no longer be with the silver and black? Look, I think Max Crosby is kind of at a point where he finally was dealt with the injury bug this season. He's still relatively young at about 27 years of age, but the NFL comes at you quick. And just with all the things he's had to deal with the last 3 years with the Raiders, I think he's not going to take a pay cut this time around. I mean, last time when his contract was due, he gave us a little bit of a team-friendly deal. I don't see him doing that this season. And ultimately, I think the Raiders are going to have to get a lot more serious about building a serious contender and about building a competitive roster because I think Max Crosby, I think his patience is definitely growing shorter and shorter with his franchise. He's getting closer towards the age of 30. And this is just my personal opinion, but I kind of feel like this could be the last shot for the Raiders to show Max Crosby some life within this organization. We're going to have to get a quarterback, and ultimately we're going to have to find a way to prove to him that we can legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. You know that's what a guy like Max Crosby wants in his career. And at this point with this franchise, I don't put anything off the table. I mean, we all thought guys like Josh Jacobs, like Devontae Adams, they weren't going to leave. And ultimately, they did end up leaving. So at this point, I mean, I've seen a lot of players come and go. And I think Max Crosby, he is willing to stay. But like I said, his patience seems to be running thinner. And if the Raiders mess around this offseason, if we hire the wrong head coach again, if we can't address the quarterback position, if we're in like essentially another rebuild, then that's definitely where things could get scary. And I would not put Max Crosby demanding a trade off the table completely. So it's going to be an interesting and also a scary time for the Raiders here in the near future. There could be a lot of turnover for this roster, especially if AP gets fired as a head coach. Because if AP is gone, very likely Patrick Graham could be gone as well. A lot of these players, a lot of the coaching staff could be gone next season. So could be a lot of different moving pieces for the Raiders. And they more than likely are going to have to address the whole Max Crosby contract situation, which is going to be tricky as well because unfortunately for Crosby, I mean, this has been a down year for his standards. Only 45 tackles, 7.5 sacks, when last season he had double those numbers. And this is the first season where he was dealt with a serious injury with that ankle surgery that ended his season. So it's definitely going to be an interesting time period here in the next couple months or so. But Raider Nation, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below of this whole Antonio Pierce situation. And also let me know about the whole Max Crosby situation as well. But with that being said, Raider Nation, that's all for you guys in today's video. Anybody that's new to the channel, you guys love Raider related content just like this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. That being said, I will see you guys in the next one.